A wrong number shouldn't rewrite your life. That's the ordinary truth, the one Elena Moretti clung to as she fumbled with her phone in the echoing, sterile cold of St. Jude's Regional Hospital. Her fingers were slick with nervous sweat, trembling so badly she could barely hold the cracked screen. She was trying to reach Dario, her ex-boyfriend, the man who had promised her stability, who had sworn he'd always be the emergency contact. He was also the man who had ditched her 3 months ago for someone with more flash, someone he called a sports car while she was merely a comfortable couch. But at 2:47 a.m., when a sudden, searing pain left her doubled over and bleeding, desperation eclipsed pride. She didn't notice the transposed digits. She was aiming for Dario's number, a known, forgettable sequence. Instead, her shaking hand had dialed a string of numbers, a private satellite line that shouldn't have existed in any known directory. The voice that answered was not Dario's irritable, half-asleep grumble. It was low, dense, and utterly immediate, velvet authority wrapped in steel. "Who calls this line?" Elena should have hung up. She should have recognized the raw, unmasked power in that voice, the kind of presence that felt like a physical threat. But the pain in her abdomen was blinding, and the words tumbled out, ragged and breathless. "Please, I need help. St. Jude's, room 237. I'm bleeding and the nurse won't listen, and I don't know what's happening to me." Silence, then, a sound that seemed to travel across miles of wire and yet felt right next to her ear, a sound of supreme displeasure. "Hold on, I'm coming." The line went dead. Elena was still gripping the phone when she thought, how strange. A total stranger sounded more concerned than the man I dated for 2 years. She couldn't have known the truth. She hadn't called a stranger at all. She had called Ken Romano, the undisputed boss of the Romano Syndicate, a man who hadn't responded to a distress call outside of his inner circle in over a decade. And she certainly couldn't have known that by dawn, when the first pale light of Tuesday crept through her hospital window, a line of 30 matte black cars, armored sedans and SUVs, would be sitting in absolute silence in the employee parking lot below. Their tinted windows were fixed on the 3rd floor. Ken Romano stood among them, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his gaze locked on the window of room 237. All because of a misdial, all because some mistakes are destiny wearing a disguise. Chapter 1. Elena Moretti had always been the forgettable one. Not ugly, that would have at least given her a memorable edge. Not strikingly beautiful either. She occupied that cruel middle ground where people's eyes slid past her in a crowd, where supervisors called her by the wrong name, and where her own family had politely encouraged her to minimize her presence. At 26, she worked as a medical transcriptionist at the very hospital where she now lay bleeding. 3rd shift, basement office, processing notes that would be reviewed by people who never stopped by to introduce themselves. 4 years she'd been there. Nurse Elena Russo still called her Emma. Her younger sister, Christina DeLuca, was the beautiful one, the one their mother dressed in designer clothes and paraded at church functions. Christina had married a successful lawyer and now posted enviable Instagram photos of her perfect penthouse renovations and her new Pomeranian, Espresso. Their mother's preference had always been clear. "Elena, darling, could you stand to the side for this photo? Christina's outfit is so lovely, we want it to be the focus." The unspoken message was brutal. You're lucky to have a career because no one is going to choose you for anything else. Dario Moretti had been the only exception. They had met at a university cafeteria. He was an architect's assistant who for 2 years had actually looked at her, actually remembered her name. But 3 months ago she overheard him laughing with a friend. "Elena, she's comfortable, man, like a good old couch. But Madison is a Ferrari. You don't keep the couch when the Ferrari wants you." He'd left that week. Elena signed the lease papers without protest, packed his things neatly, and out of pure, pathetic habit, kept his number in her emergency contacts. Tonight proved how futile that was. Waking with severe cramping, she had driven herself to St. Jude, checking into the ER where apparently she didn't matter. Nurse Elena Russo, whose reports Elena had transcribed countless times, barely glanced up. "Probably just a bad period, honey. Take some ibuprofen." "But the pain is different, and there's so much blood." "Look, you work here. You know how backed up we are on a Friday night. Unless you're dying, you need to wait your turn. Elena waited 2 hours on a hallway gurney, watching people with less severe complaints whisked away. She texted Christina, hospital, something wrong, scared. Christina's response arrived 20 minutes later. Can't talk, ski trip in Aspen, try not to be dramatic, you know how you get. That's when Elena had made the misdialed call. 15 minutes after that impossible conversation, Elena lay in a storage room turned overflow room, room 237, staring at the water-stained ceiling. She was wondering if she was delirious because that voice on the phone, the one like velvet and smoke, had sounded like her pain had personally offended him, like he would move the earth to reach her. She didn't notice the temperature in the room dropping, didn't see the fluorescent lights flicker. She only felt a fundamental shift in the air, like the building itself was holding its breath. Then from the hallway she heard it, a low, dangerous rumble of a man's voice that made every primitive instinct in her body scream predator, followed by Nurse Gianna Russo's voice, high and thin. "Sir, you can't be back here, sir, I'm calling security." The door to room 237 opened. Elena's breath stopped. The man who entered shouldn't exist in a hospital at 3:00 a.m. Ken Romano, 6'4" of barely contained, tailored power. He wore a charcoal suit that looked expensive but was rumpled as if he'd thrown it on in seconds. Dark hair, silver at the temples, framed a face carved from granite. His eyes were the color of dark amber, but it was his presence that hit her like a physical force. The room instantly felt too small. He crossed to her bedside in 3 effortless strides. Those impossible eyes scanned her, head to toe, with an intensity that should have been frightening, but instead felt like being truly seen for the first time in her entire life. "Elena Moretti," he said, his voice the same velvet and smoke from the phone, strained now with urgency. "Tell me exactly what's wrong." How do you know my name?" "You called me, you said you needed help." His hand moved to hover inches above her abdomen. She felt heat radiating from his palm, his eyes narrowed. "How long have you been bleeding?" 2 hours, but I don't understand." "Did they examine you?" "The nurse said it was probably just." Ken's head snapped toward the door where Gianna Russo had appeared with 2 trembling security guards. The look he gave them made all 3 stumble backward. "The woman in this room," he said, his voice quiet, dangerously controlled, "has been hemorrhaging for 2 hours from an ectopic pregnancy that is currently rupturing. In approximately 8 minutes her fallopian tube will burst completely, and she will bleed to death internally. And you told her to take ibuprofen." The silence that followed was suffocating. "Get Dr. Adrian," Gianna whispered, her face ashen. "Get him now." The security guards ran. Elena stared up at the impossible man. How do you know that?" He finally looked back at her. "Because I know where to look and I know how to interpret distress. Because your presence here is wrong, fear, pain, and something dying inside you." His jaw clenched. "You should have called me hours ago." "I didn't call you, I don't even know who you are. I was trying to reach my ex-boyfriend." Then fate intervened. He moved closer and impossibly his hand found hers. His skin was burning hot. "I'm Ken Romano and you're going to be fine, Elena. I give you my word." "Mr. Romano, you need to leave while we prep her for emergency surgery." Dr. Adrian, the hospital administrator, had arrived, looking terrified. Ken didn't move. "She goes into surgery with the best surgeon you have. She gets every resource this hospital possesses, and I will be here when she wakes up. Are we clear?" It wasn't a question. Dr. Adrian swallowed hard. "Crystal clear, sir." As they wheeled Elena toward the surgical wing, her hand still clasped in Ken's, she caught a glimpse through the window. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, and in the parking lot below, sitting in perfect formation like a silent military unit, were dozens of black cars. Not just sedans, armored, silent, and deadly, all of them staring up at her window. Elena's vision was going hazy from blood loss, but she heard Ken's voice one more time as they reached the operating room doors. "Sleep, Elena Moretti. When you wake, everything will be different. You called for help and the boss answered. That debt doesn't end with surgery." The last thing she saw before anesthesia took her was his eyes, amber bleeding to molten silver in the weak light, and the absolute certainty that she had just stepped out of her invisible, forgettable life and into a world where she was suddenly, inexplicably visible. Chapter 2. Elena woke to the smell of expensive leather and something else, cologne, wood smoke, and a primal electric scent that made her pulse quicken. Her eyes fluttered open, white ceiling, beeping monitors, but underneath it all that scent. Alive, potent. "You're awake." She turned her head too quickly, sending a wave of dizziness through her. Ken Romano was sitting in the visitor's chair. He hadn't left. The sun was streaming through the window now, and he was still there. He looked different in full daylight, less like a fever dream, more like something carved from polished steel. The expensive suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, the top button undone. He'd been here all night for her, a stranger. "The surgery went well," he said, his voice gentler than she remembered. "Dr. Adrian removed the ectopic pregnancy. You'll recover fully. You'll be able to have children if you choose." Elena blinked back tears. "Thank you, I don't understand why you came, but thank you." "You called me." "I called a wrong number." "No," he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, those amber eyes pinning her in place. "You called exactly the right number, Elena Moretti. The question is, why?" "I was trying to reach my ex-boyfriend." "I know, Dario Morti, architect's assistant, currently cohabitating with Madison Chen in a condo he certainly can't afford." Ken's expression was flat, but something cold flashed in his eyes. "He received 17 missed calls and 12 text messages from you over the past 3 months. He responded to none of them, yet you kept his number listed as your emergency contact." Elena felt her face burn with humiliation. "How do you know that?" "Because I had someone look into your life while you were in surgery. I needed to understand who you are and why my private line, a number that hasn't been dialed by anyone outside the most secure circle in over a decade, suddenly rang at 2:47 this morning with your voice on it." "Your private line. I just misdialed Dario's number." "Show me." He pulled out his phone, opened it and handed it to her. "Pull up your call history." Elena's hands shook as she took the phone. It was warm, like everything about him seemed to radiate heat. She navigated to her recent calls. Dario's number, 503, 555 7849, the number she had actually called. 503, 555 ROMANO. That's not possible. I couldn't have dialed letters." "Yet you did." Ken took his phone back. "ROMANO translates to a specific sequence in standard dialing, but that number is intentionally not registered in any public or corporate system. It exists solely for the Romano family's deepest contacts. You breached that protocol without knowing the code." "My family? I don't understand. Are you telling me I accidentally called, what, the FBI?" He stood and moved to the window. In the daylight she could see how he moved, too fluid, too predatory, like contained violence. "Tell me, Elena, what do you know about the structure of organized crime in this city?" Her mouth went dry. "I transcribe police reports. I know the names, the families, the mythology." "Most mythology is just history that civilians have forgotten," he stated. He turned back, and for just a second his eyes had that molten quality again. "I am Ken Romano, boss of the Northern Syndicate, responsible for operations spanning from Seattle to the California border. When I received a distress call and left the territory at 3 a.m., my security followed protocol. The black cars in the parking lot." "My detail," he confirmed. 30 of my most trusted. When the boss moves urgently, they follow for protection and immediate leverage." "This is insane. I'm hallucinating." "You're not hallucinating, Elena. You're just learning that the world is larger and stranger than you were taught." He moved back to her bedside and sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could feel that radiating heat again. "Here, what we know. You dialed a number that exists outside human telecommunications. You reached my personal line, a line keyed only to family business or high-level leverage. And when I heard your voice," he trailed off, jaw clenching. "What?" Elena whispered. "Every instinct I possess screamed at me to reach you, to protect you, to claim you as a necessary asset." He stopped abruptly, stood again, and paced to the window. We need to determine why you could access that line, why your distress call felt like a summons I couldn't ignore, why my entire organization is currently questioning my sanity because I have abandoned operations to sit in a hospital and guard a medical transcriptionist who nearly died. I'm nobody, Elena heard herself say, the familiar, painful truth escaping. I'm the forgettable one. There's no reason a syndicate boss should care if I live or die. Ken was across the room in a heartbeat, moving faster than human sight could track. Suddenly he was there, hands on either side of her bed, cagging her in, his face inches from hers. Listen to me very carefully. His voice was rough, barely controlled. You are not nobody. You are a woman whose call breached secure operational barriers. You are someone my instinct has decided matters. And in my world, Elena Moretti, that makes you someone very important indeed. Why? That's what we're going to find out. But first you're going to heal, you're going to rest, and you're going to let me protect you while we determine what you truly are to this family. What I am, I'm a medical transcriptionist who lives alone and gets forgotten at family gatherings. You're a woman who accidentally called a kingpin and made him come running. He smiled, the corner of his mouth lifting. Trust me, that's never happened before. Dr. Adrian knocked, interrupting the moment. Miss Moretti, how are you feeling? Confused, Elena admitted. Understandable. Mr. Romano has requested you be moved to a private executive suite for recovery. The hospital administration has agreed. I can't afford. It's handled, Ken said smoothly. You'll stay under medical supervision for 48 hours. After that, we'll discuss next steps. Next steps? He smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. You involved yourself in our world. Accidentally or not, you've been noticed by people who operate outside the law. I need to determine if you're a dormant asset, someone with strategic value, or if you're simply a human with extraordinary, catastrophic luck. Either way, until we know what you are and why you could reach me, you're under my protection. I don't need protection. 3 hours ago, you were bleeding to death in an overflow room because nobody thought you mattered enough to examine properly. His voice went cold. That doesn't happen to people under my protection. Ever. He left before she could respond. Elena lay back against the pillows, her head spinning. Mafia Syndicate's protection. None of this made sense. But as they wheeled her to the private suite an hour later, a room that looked more like a luxury hotel, with impeccably dressed men guarding her door, she couldn't shake one truth. For the first time in her entire forgettable life, someone powerful had looked at her and decided she mattered. Even if it terrified her, someone had finally seen her, and he called himself the boss. Chapter 3. Elena woke to angry voices outside her door. Absolutely not. The boss said no visitors except approved medical staff. I'm her sister. You can't seriously expect me to believe this is some kind of VIP service. Christina DeLuca. Elena's heart did a complicated twist. Her sister had come, driven back from Aspen. Maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe Christina did care. Ma'am, I don't care if you're the Queen of England. Ken Romano's orders are absolute. Miss Moretti is recovering from emergency surgery and is not to be disturbed. Ken Romano? Who is Ken Romano? This is a hospital in Seattle, not some medieval kingdom. The door opened. It was Christina who entered, but a woman who moved like liquid mercury. Tall, dark-skinned, with close-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. She wore tailored slacks and a blazer that looked both expensive and functionally ready for a fight. She radiated the same contained, dangerous energy as Ken. Your sister is making a scene, the woman said without preamble. The boss wants to know if you wish to see her. He's asking my permission. Elena struggled to sit up. You're under his protection. That means your comfort matters. I'm Vera Castellano, captain of the boss's security detail. I've been watching over you while you slept. How long was I asleep? 14 hours. It's Sunday morning. Your body needed the rest, healing from both physical trauma and the shock of learning our world exists. I'm still not sure I believe. Vera's eyes flashed with a cold intensity. Believe it. Now about your sister, do you want to see her? Elena thought about Christina's text. Try not to be dramatic, you know how you get. What is she saying out there? Vera's expression turned carefully neutral. That she's concerned about you, that she flew back early to check on you, that it's unreasonable for security to block family access. She didn't fly back out of concern, Elena said quietly. She flew back because someone told her something strange was happening, and Christina has always been curious about things that might affect her reputation. Perceptive, Vera nodded. The boss said you'd been invisible to your family. He wasn't exaggerating. How much did he tell you about me? Everything. When the boss brings a human under his protection, the entire family needs to understand the situation. He told us about the misdial, your bleeding, the hospital's negligence, and how his instinct reacted to your distress call. How did he react? Vera's eyes went distant. I've served Ken Romano for 23 years. I've seen him in battle, in rage, in grief. I've never seen him move the way he moved when your call came through, like someone had reached into his chest and yanked a lifeline. I still don't understand why. Neither does he. That's what makes this interesting. In our world, Elena, there are bonds, loyalty, alliance, claims. The most powerful is the unbreakable claim, when a boss decides someone is vital to his survival, his legacy, or his sanity. You think he claimed me? Elena asked, mouth dry. I think something connected you to him in a way that shouldn't be possible, and until we understand what, you're either in grave danger or under the protection of the most powerful syndicate leader in the Northwest, possibly both. A crash from the hallway interrupted them. Christina was back. I don't care about your protocols. The door banged open. Christina stood there, face flushed with indignation, her travel outfit somehow pristine. She rushed to Elena, bedside, grabbing her hand. Oh my God, Elena, I was so worried. When Mom called and said you'd had emergency surgery, I flew straight back. Why didn't you tell me it was serious? I texted you at 2 a.m., Elena said, pulling her hand away. You said I was being dramatic. A flicker of guilt or annoyance crossed Christina's face. I was hungover, honey, girls' trip. I didn't realize you were actually in danger. She looked around the suite, her eyes widening at the luxury and the guards. What is going on, Elena? Mom said someone called her saying you were in protective custody, like witness protection or something. Who are all these people? Vera stood smoothly. Miss Morty is recovering from a serious medical emergency. The circumstances surrounding her treatment required additional security measures. What circumstances? What aren't you telling me? Elena, are you in some kind of trouble? Because if you've gotten involved with something illegal, it'll reflect on the whole family. My husband, Marco, is up for partner at his firm, and we can't have any scandals. Christina, Elena snapped, pulling her hand away. I nearly died. I had an ectopic pregnancy that ruptured. I was hemorrhaging for hours before anyone took me seriously. That's what happened. There's no scandal. Because I requested them. Ken's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood in the doorway. He changed clothes, dark slacks, a charcoal sweater that did nothing to hide the predatory grace of his build. His eyes, fixed on Christina, made Elena's sister actually flinch. Who are you? Christina demanded, recovering her bravado. Ken Romano, I'm the man who saved your sister's life. He moved into the room. Christina's expression shifted instantly from suspicion to fascination. Women always look at him that way, Elena realized. You're the one who called the administrator, Christina said. They said someone very important had taken an interest in Elena's case. Are you a doctor? A lawyer? No, then what gives you the right to post guards outside my sister's room and restrict family access? Ken smiled, and it was all teeth. The right of someone who actually showed up when she needed help, unlike her family, who were too busy with ski trips to respond to her emergency. That's not fair, Christina flushed. Fair, Ken's voice dropped to something dangerous. Your sister texted you at 2 a.m. saying she was at the hospital and scared. You told her not to be dramatic. She called someone else for help because her own family had made it clear she didn't matter. That's what's not fair, Mr. Luca. You don't know anything about our family. I know enough. I know that Elena works at this hospital and still had to wait 2 hours for treatment because no one thought she was important enough to examine. I know she's been invisible to people who should have cherished her. That ends now." "Are you two together?" Christina asked, her eyes narrowed. "Complicated," Elena started. "But yes," Ken finished. "Elena is under my personal protection. That makes her very important to me and to my people." "Your people? What are you in there, the Syndicate?" "Something like that." Ken's smile widened. "Now, Miss DeLuca, you've confirmed your sister is alive and recovering. I suggest you return to your Aspen existence. Elena needs rest, not performance anxiety." "Excuse me." "You're excused." It wasn't loud, but the command in Ken's voice made Christina flinch. She leaned down, whispering low to Elena, "He's dangerous, Ellie, I can feel it, be careful." Ken heard, of course he heard. "Your sister is finally right about something. I am very dangerous, Elena, but never to you." Christina left with one backward glance, confusion and something almost like envy written across her face. Chapter 4. You didn't have to be so harsh with her. Elena sank back against the pillows. "Yes, I did." Ken sat on the edge of her bed again, his hand finding hers. That electric heat flared between them. People who have made you feel invisible don't get to waltz in and play concerned family when it suits them. You deserve better. "You barely know me." "I know enough." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I know you called for help, even though everyone in your life had taught you that you didn't deserve it. I know you're stronger than you think. And I know that whatever connection exists between us, it's real enough that my instincts won't let me leave your side." Vera mentioned an unbreakable claim. Ken's jaw clenched. "It's possible but also unprecedented for a civilian. My kind doesn't simply claim an outsider for simple protection. Yet here we are." "So what happens now?" "Now," he stood but kept her hand in his, "now you heal. In 2 days you'll be discharged. And then, Elena Moretti, you're coming home with me. Home to the territory where we can figure out what you are to me and why you could call me. Where you'll be safe while we unravel this mystery." His eyes held hers. "Unless you'd rather go back to your studio apartment, your basement office, and your invisible life." Elena thought about her job, her family, and her ex-boyfriend who'd compared her to a cooch. Then she thought about the way Ken looked at her, like she was a puzzle worth solving, a person worth protecting. "I'll come with you," she whispered. His smile was fierce and beautiful. "Good, because I wasn't actually giving you a choice." Chapter 5. The private suite had become Elena's gilded cage. For 2 days she was poked and prodded by doctors who looked at her with fear. Dr. Adrian checked on her every 4 hours. Nurses brought medication she hadn't ordered. And always there were the guards, Vera, Dominic, Sienna, and the others, all treating her like she was made of spun glass and dynamite. They were the bosses in a circle, his capos, and they treated her with grudging respect. It was Monday evening when Ken arrived with clothes. "Discharge papers are signed," he announced, setting down several expensive-looking shopping bags. "Your personal belongings have been collected from your apartment. You'll stay at the estate until we determine what you are." "You went to my apartment." "Sienna did, with your keys. Your landlord has been compensated for an early lease termination. Your job has been informed you're taking indefinite medical leave." He pulled out a dark cashmere sweater, leather pants and boots that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "These are for travel. The rest of your wardrobe is being updated. You'll need appropriate clothing for the territory." "My clothes were fine." "Your clothes were designed to help you disappear. No more disappearing, Elena." Ken sat beside her and cupped her chin. "You're with me now. People will look at you. You might as well give them something worth seeing." "I'm not a doll you can dress up." "No, you're a woman who's been taught to minimize herself for everyone else's comfort. That ends tonight. When you walk into my territory, you walk in as someone under the boss's protection. You dress the part, you carry yourself with confidence, and you let everyone see what I see." "And what's that?" "Someone worth risking everything for." He released her and stood. "Get dressed, we leave in an hour." The SUV waiting outside the hospital was matte black, armored, and absurdly luxurious. Ken sat in the back, speaking rapidly into his secure phone in Italian, a torrent of hard consonants and rolling vowels that sounded dangerous and ancient. He switched to English when she climbed in beside him. The drive took them out of the city, heading toward the rugged foothills of the Cascade Mountains, far from known civilization. "What happens when we get there?" Elena asked. "You'll be shown to my private quarters in the main house. You'll meet the senior capos, the leaders who govern the various operations under my rule. Tomorrow, we begin assessment." "Assessment?" "To determine if you're a genuine strategic asset, someone whose involvement could accidentally or intentionally affect the family's business, or if you're simply a civilian who must be compensated and secured. If the latter, you go free with resources and ironclad protection. If the former," Ken grew serious, "there are complications." "What kind?" "The annual Syndicate Summit. It occurs in 2 days. It's when the leaders of the other families, the eastern, southern and coastal territories, meet to discuss treaties and power divisions. News travels fast when I claim a woman this suddenly. They will want to meet you. They will want to assess if you are a liability." "A liability?" "If you are my unbreakable claim, and my instinct suggests you are, then fighting it will only cause us pain. It means your soul is bound to mine. Your life becomes entwined with the Romano family. You would live under my protection, but you would be a target for every rival family. You'd be the Queenpin of the Northern Syndicate." "That sounds like a prison." "To civilians perhaps, to us it's the greatest commitment. It's not a choice, Elena. The claim either exists or it doesn't. And if it does, it means I would burn down the world to keep you safe." "Why me?" she burst out. "You're the boss, you could have anyone. Why would fate choose someone like me?" Ken turned back to her, and the intensity of his gaze made her breath stop. "Because you're strong enough to stand beside danger and not flinch. Because you survived invisibility and neglect and still had the courage to call for help. Because when I heard your voice on that phone, something in my blood recognized something in yours." The SUV turned onto a private road marked only by 2 enormous, unmarked stone pillars. The forest grew denser, and Elena could feel something in the air, a heavy, controlled energy. "We're crossing the territory boundary," Ken said quietly. "The secure perimeter. If you were fully civilian, you'd feel nothing, but if you are meant for this world." Elena gasped. It felt like walking through a wall of electricity. Not painful but shocking, a sudden awakening. Every nerve ending came alive. She could feel the enormous weight of the surrounding forest, the ancient trees, the unseen security detail crisscrossing like threads through the darkness. Then it faded, leaving her breathless. Ken's hand gripping hers confirmed it. "You felt it. What was that?" "Proof that you're not fully civilian. Pure outsiders feel nothing. Those with connections, with deep loyalty, or with untapped potential for this life react." The estate emerged from the trees like something from a dream, part modern architecture, part ancient fortress, all glass, timber and stone. As the SUV pulled up, Elena saw them. Security detail everywhere, dozens of them, sitting in perfect formation on the lawn, their weapons concealed but their eyes sharp. "Your welcoming committee," Ken said dryly. "They wanted to see the woman who could summon their boss." The door opened. Dominic, one of Ken's muscle, appeared, offering his hand. The moment her feet touched the ground, every head turned toward her, and then, simultaneously, they dipped their heads in acknowledgement. "They recognize you," Ken said, suddenly beside her. "The claim isn't confirmed yet, but they can sense my interest. To the family, that's enough." "This is really happening," she whispered. "Yes," he offered his arm. "Welcome to the Northern Territory, Elena Moretti. In 2 days we'll know if this is your home forever or just a temporary sanctuary." She took his arm, and together they walked through the massive doors, into a world where she was no longer invisible, where she was impossibly seen. But as the doors closed behind them, and Elena caught sight of the figures waiting in the entrance hall, dangerous people with assessing eyes, she realized something that made her heart race. Being seen by the Syndicate meant being exposed. She just didn't know yet if they wanted to crown her or devour her. Chapter 6. The entrance hall was designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings, timber beams, and tapestries depicting scenes of conquest and power. Everything screamed wealth, history, and menace. But it was the 7 figures waiting that truly demanded attention. They stood in a semicircle, each radiating the same predatory grace as Ken. "My senior capos," Ken said quietly, his hand settling on the small of Elena's back, that electric warmth grounding her. "The leaders who govern the operations under my rule." The closest figure stepped forward, a woman who looked to be in her 40s with sharp features and eyes like chips of jade. She wore tailored, expensive clothing. "Lydia Caruso," she introduced herself, her voice cultured and sharp. "Senior capo and the boss's second." Her gaze raked over Elena with clinical precision. "So, you're the human who accessed the private line. You're underwhelming." "I didn't mean to," Elena replied, fighting the urge to step closer to Ken. "Intention is irrelevant. Results matter. The question is, what connection runs through your life that allowed you to access His Majesty's private frequency? That's what will determine if you're a necessary asset or a fatal vulnerability." "Elena is under my protection, Lydia. Remember that." Ken's voice was mild but steel-edged. "Of course, my boss. I'm simply curious, as we all are." The next to step forward was a massive man, easily 6'5", with a shaved head and dark tattoos, but his smile was genuine and warm. "Garrett Stone, head of enforcement. Don't mind Lydia. She's suspicious of everyone, keeps us all alive." He winked at Elena. "Welcome to the territory, little human. You've got guts." "She doesn't know what she's walked into yet," drawled a man who looked barely older than a college student. Blonde, pretty in a dangerous way. "I'm Felix Dane, head of logistics, and I think this whole situation is fascinating." "Fascinating meaning catastrophic," said a dark-skinned woman with an eyebrow piercing. "Nora Chen, head of operations. No offense, human, but if you're not the boss's unbreakable claim, you've just caused an international incident for nothing." "International," Elena looked at Ken. "The syndicate community is vast and political," Ken explained. "News travels fast when a boss takes a civilian under protection this abruptly. Other territories are interested." "Interested meaning concerned," said another woman, small and delicate with eyes like polished obsidian. "I am Yuki Tanaka, head of finances. The Eastern families have already sent inquiries. They want to know if you're a threat." "How could I possibly be a threat? I'm a medical transcriptionist who misdialed a boss across secure channels." "I've been in this family for 60 years, girl," interrupted the 6th figure, a man with silver hair and a face carved from granite. "Alessandro. In that time I've seen 3 civilians breach the inner circle this quickly. All 3 were either FBI plants or informants. You claim ignorance. That makes you either a liar or something unprecedented." Elena felt her temper flare. "I'm not a liar." "Peace, Alessandro." The 7th and final figure spoke, his voice like honey over gravel. He was younger, with warm brown skin and eyes that held genuine kindness. "I'm Ilias Morty, head of intelligence, and I for one am willing to give you the benefit of the doubt." He smiled at Elena. "Anyone who can make the boss abandon protocol and race to a human hospital at 3 in the morning is worth getting to know." "Thank you," Elena said quietly. "Enough introductions." Ken's hand pressed more firmly against her back. "Elena has been through surgery and travel. She needs rest. We'll convene tomorrow for assessment. Until then, my orders stand. She is to be treated as an honored guest and potential queenpin. Anyone who forgets that will answer to me personally." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "Understood, my boss," Lydia said, and the others echoed her. Ken guided Elena toward a grand staircase. Vera appeared, falling into step beside them. "Your quarters are prepared, my boss. Miss Morty's rooms are adjacent as requested." "Adjacent," Elena whispered as they climbed. "Shouldn't I be in a guest wing?" "You're under my personal protection. That means you stay where I can reach you quickly. The capos are loyal, but they're also territorial and suspicious. Until the claim is confirmed or denied, you don't leave my sight." The suite beyond the door was stunning. A 4-poster bed, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest, a walk-in closet filled with her old clothes hanging beside dozens of new pieces. "Your landlord has been fully compensated for early lease termination," Ken said, leaning against the doorframe. If the claim is false, you can return to your old life. But if it's real, Elena, you'll need to understand that everything changes. You're very certain this might be real. My instincts are certain, and they're rarely wrong about things that matter. Ken straightened. Rest. Vera will wake you for breakfast. Tomorrow we begin testing, background checks, genealogy research, and situational assessments. We need to understand what you are before the summit. And if we don't figure it out in time... His eyes flashed silver in the dim light. Then we'll find out the hard way whether you're mine or not. Chapter 7. Elena's sanctuary for the next day was the estate's grand, 3-story library, scented with old paper and leather. She devoured non-fiction, books on corporate law, international finance, and biographies of powerful women in history, trying to prepare for a world she still couldn't believe was hers. She was reading a passage on corporate takeovers when she heard a soft knock. Come in. Vera entered carrying a tray. Tea and sandwiches. The boss would have my hide if you collapsed from hunger. He micromanages when things matter. What if I'm not his claim? What if I'm just some weird strategic anomaly? Elena asked, sinking onto the couch. Then you go back to your human life, probably a lot wealthier and definitely more interesting. But Elena, I don't think that's what happens. Why? Because when the boss looks at you, his eyes go silver. That only happens when his focus is absolute, when the primitive instinct is close to the surface. Ken Romano's instinct is ancient and powerful. Something about you woke it up. I'm scared. Good, you should be. Becoming a Queenpin isn't a fairy tale. It's dangerous and political. But you'd also never be invisible again. You'd be cherished, protected, and seen every single day for the rest of your very long life. Later that morning, the capos convened in the medical wing, a state-of-the-art facility hidden in the eastern corridor. Dr. Soren Voss, the family physician, a tall, thin man, directed Elena to an examination chair. Miss Morty, this will take approximately 2 hours. I'll need blood samples, a cheek swab for DNA analysis, and your participation in several situational assessments. The court filed in, watching, judging. Elena tried to ignore them as Dr. Voss drew vial after vial of blood. We'll map your ancestry, check for deep-seated family ties, and assess your natural aptitude for high-stakes environments. If you have any connections to rival families, even distant or dormant, we need to know. And if you find nothing, Elena asked. Then we look deeper, Lydia Caruso said from her position against the wall, because something allowed you to breach the private line. Power like that doesn't come from nowhere. Or, Alessandro interjected, she's an unwitting plant sent by a rival territory to infiltrate the boss's court. Ken's voice was like ice. Alessandro, that's enough, continue, Doctor. Dr. Voss produced a small, sterile scalpel. One more test. I need to make a small incision on your palm to test healing speed. Civilians with deep-seated ties to our world often show accelerated recovery. He made a small cut across her palm. Elena hissed at the sting. Ken was instantly beside her, his hand gripping her shoulder. How long? He demanded. We wait and observe. Normal human healing would show no change in 5 minutes. Deeply connected assets will show accelerated clotting and initial closure. At 4 minutes the bleeding stopped. At 5 minutes the wound had begun to close, far faster than normal. Definitely a dormant asset, Dr. Voss murmured. The question is how strong the connection is. How long for the DNA results? Lydia asked. 48 hours for basic ancestry, 72 for detailed strategic ties. Dr. Voss turned to Elena. One more test, the most important one. He produced a small silver box and carefully opened it. Inside was a single, intricately carved silver artifact, a pin designed like a raven. This is a loyalty sigil. It reacts to strong emotional connections and, most relevantly, to an unbreakable claim. Your boss, I'll need you to hold it first. Ken took the pin. It flared bright amber, the same color as his eyes. Now, Miss Morty, take it from the boss's hand. Physical contact matters. Elena reached out, her hand trembling. The moment her fingers brushed Ken's, the pin exploded into brilliant silver-gold light that filled the entire room. The capos gasped. The light intensified and Elena felt something surge through her, like lightning and honey and home all at once. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and completely right. Then it faded, leaving the pin a soft, pulsing glow in her palm. Dr. Voss removed his glasses. Well, that's definitive. What does it mean? Elena whispered. It means, Lydia Caruso said slowly, and for the first time there was genuine wonder in her voice, that the claim is real. The sigil only reacts that strongly to genuine, unbreakable loyalty. I've seen this test performed dozens of times. I've never seen a reaction that powerful. Ken's hand tightened on Elena's shoulder. Are you certain? Completely, the emotional foundation is there. She's your unbreakable claim, my boss. The family finally has its Queenpin. Elena stared at the glowing pin in her hand, her mind spinning. This was real. The claim was real, in 2 days. She would be bound to Ken Romano and his syndicate, transformed from an invisible medical transcriptionist to a Queenpin. I need air, she said suddenly, stumbling toward the door. Chapter 8. Elena made it to an inner courtyard before her legs gave out. She sank onto a stone bench, gasping for air. This was too much. 3 days ago she'd been bleeding and forgotten. Now she was royalty in the criminal underworld. Breathe, Elena. She looked up to find Ilias Morty standing there, his expression gentle. I can't do this, she whispered. I'm nobody, I can't be a Queenpin, I can't rule an organization like this. You already did, Ilias interrupted softly. The moment you called for help instead of giving up. The moment you walked into that dining room and faced Alessandro's accusations without backing down. You've been surviving invisibility your whole life, Elena. That takes more strength than you know. But I don't know anything about your world. You'll learn, we'll teach you. You'll have Ken who would die before letting harm come to you. You'll have the capos who will come to respect you. You'll have the entire family who are already half in love with you just for making their boss smile. He doesn't smile. He does now, that's the point. The summit starts in 2 days. Until then you have time to adjust, to learn, to decide if this life is worth the cost. Ilias stood. Come on, the boss is probably tearing the estate apart looking for you. Let's prevent property damage. As they walked back toward the medical wing, Elena caught sight of something that made her stop. Through a window she could see Ken. He was standing alone in a corridor, his forehead pressed against the wall, his hands clenched into fists. He looked absolutely terrified. He's scared too, Elena whispered. Of course he is. He's lived alone for decades, convinced he'd never find an equal. Now fate drops you in his lap with 48 hours to prepare for a claim that will change everything. Ilias smiled sadly. Commitment is terrifying, Elena, especially when it means forever. Elena watched Ken for another moment. Then she straightened her spine, wiped her tears, and walked back in. When Ken saw her, the relief on his face was so raw it made her chest ache. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I panicked. You're entitled to panic. This is a lot. She took a breath. But I'm not running, not yet. I want to understand what this means, what I'm becoming. The smile he gave her was worth every moment of fear. Then let's find out together, he said, and offered his hand. Chapter 9. The next 36 hours were a blur of intense preparation. Elena spent hours in the library, researching the history of the Northern Syndicate, the old treaties, and the power players in rival families. She learned that being a Queenpin was dangerous. Assassination attempts were common, rivals tested new claims constantly, and if she proved weak, challenges to Ken's leadership would follow. She was reading a file on the volatile Eastern families when Felix Dane, head of logistics, appeared. Light reading, he asked, lounging against a bookshelf. I'm finding out that I'm wildly unprepared for this. The claim changes you, Elena. It makes you stronger, more focused. You'll be ready for what's coming. And if you're not, the rest of us will help you. We're loyal to our boss. If you're his claim, you're ours too. The Eastern delegation is coming tonight, Ken announced, walking into the library. Yes, which means you need to clear your head before dealing with politics. Please, Elena, let me show you something. He led her deep into the secluded woods behind the estate, moving along paths only he could see. They emerged into a clearing where a small, natural hot spring steamed in the center. The water glowed faintly blue. "The Queen's Spring," Ken said quietly. "It's been here for centuries. My mother, she was half civilian, used to come here when my father's court overwhelmed her. She died when I was 17, protecting the family from federal hunters who discovered our location." "I'm sorry." She was brave, fierce, everything a Queenpin should be. He turned to face Elena. "I'm scared, Elena, of failing you, of binding you to this life and watching you realize the cost is too high, of you deciding that invisibility was better than this crown of thorns." "I've seen your world, Ken. You're not a monster. You haven't seen what I've become in a turf war, what I've done to protect this territory. I've killed, Elena, dozens, hundreds over the years. That's what I am. Violence wrapped in civilization barely contained. And I'm invisible, wrapped in forgettable, barely noticed. We're both pretending to be something we're not. You're afraid I'll see the real you. I'm afraid you already have, and you'll realize I'm not worth the trouble. You're worth everything. You're mine, Elena Moretti. The universe decided that years ago. We're just finally catching up." He kissed her, gentle at first, then deep and demanding. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were completely silver in the dim light. "The summit begins tomorrow. Meet me in the receiving room. We'll make a decision then, confirmation or a planned exit strategy." The Eastern delegation consisted of 5 individuals who radiated power and barely concealed hostility. Their leader was a sharp-faced woman named Katina Vyulov, all ice-blue eyes and open contempt. "So this is the human who claims to be your unbreakable claim," Katina said, circling Elena like a predator. "She's underwhelming." Elena stood at Ken's right hand, wearing a deep blue dress Vera had chosen, trying not to show her fear. "Elena is my claim," Ken said coldly. "The sigil confirmed it. Tests can be faked. Bonds can be manufactured with the right leverage. I want to see proof. The summit is tomorrow. I want proof now." Katina's hand shot out, grabbing Elena's wrist. Her grip was crushing. "If she's truly your claim, Boss Romano, then hurting her should provoke an absolute irrational response. Let's test that theory." Elena gasped in pain. Ken moved faster than sight. One moment he was standing beside her. The next he had Katina by the throat, lifted off the ground, his eyes blazing silver. "Touch her again," he snarled, "and I'll paint these walls with your blood." The room exploded into chaos. Katina's delegation shifted, their eyes glowing with aggression. Ken's capos responded, and suddenly Elena was surrounded by armed men on the verge of violence. "Enough," Lydia's voice cracked like a whip. "We are civilized beings. We do not brawl in receiving rooms like common thugs." Ken slowly lowered Katina. "You came to my territory. You assaulted my claim. Explain why I shouldn't remove you permanently." "Because," Katina gasped, rubbing her throat, "the Eastern families needed to know if the claim was real. Your reaction confirms it. No unbonded male would risk a syndicate war over a civilian's bruised wrist." Katina impossibly smiled. "The Eastern families recognize Elena Moretti as your true claim and future Queenpin. Congratulations, Boss Romano. May your reign be long and your heirs strong." She and her delegation left without another word. "I should have killed her," Ken said, his jaw clenched as he examined the dark bruise already forming on Elena's wrist. "No, she got what she wanted, confirmation." Elena touched his face. "I'm okay. I endured being invisible for 26 years. I think I can handle being too visible for a change." "You're remarkable, Elena Moretti." "Not yet, but maybe tomorrow I will be. Tomorrow, the summit, the commitment, the moment everything will change forever." Chapter 10. The summit began the next day. Elena entered the massive circular council chamber, where the leaders of the 5 largest syndicates sat at a round table. Ken was at the head, his expression grim. As she sat in the empty chair at his right hand, she noticed the papers scattered across the table. Maps, sealed letters, and one bearing the intimidating seal of the rival Western Territory. "Donovan Sterling has formally challenged you to the trial of 3, Lydia explained, tracking Elena's gaze. "It's political theater, but we're obligated to accept. 3 tests over the next month: intelligence, courage, and character." What happens if I fail? Nothing happens to you directly, but Ken's authority would be questioned. Other capos might challenge his right to rule. The territory could fracture. The pressure is immense. The Western boss, Don Matteo Romano, no relation to Ken, was exactly what Elena expected. Tall, broad-shouldered, with steel-grey hair and eyes like chips of flint. Alpha Sterling, Ken said coldly, state the terms of the first test. Don Matteo smiled with condescension. Intelligence and political acumen. You're presented with the following situation: 2 major criminal operations under your rule, the Riverfront Pack and the Moon Ridge Pack, are on the brink of war over a territorial dispute. Both capos demand you rule in their favor. Both threaten to turn informant and leave your family if you rule against them. What do you do? The room fell silent. Elena's mind raced. This was a classic no-win scenario. I refuse to rule, Elena said clearly. Gasps filled the room. Don Matteo's eyes narrowed. That's a forfeit. No, it's not. Elena stepped forward, her voice carrying across the room. The scenario you've presented contains a false premise. Operations don't leave the syndicate over single disputes. They leave when they no longer trust their leadership to be fair. The real problem isn't the territorial dispute. It's that both capos feel unheard. She was improvising now, but she felt Ken's approval and Lydia's sharp attention. So instead of ruling, I'd do 3 things. First, I'd visit both territories personally. Show both capos that their Queenpin cares enough to see the disputed land herself. Second, I'd convene a joint council, letting them argue their cases in front of their people, not just their leaders. And third, I'd propose a compromise, designate the disputed area as a neutral zone, accessible to both operations, but belonging exclusively to neither, shared territory under Romano protection. She looked directly at Don Matteo. Political acumen isn't about making everyone happy. It's about making everyone feel heard while finding solutions that serve the greater good. A Queenpin who rules by fiat loses trust. A Queenpin who listens and adapts keeps the family strong. That's intelligence, Lydia said, satisfied. She found a third option. The trial is concluded, Ken. Your claim has passed. Don Matteo looked like he'd swallowed glass. The first trial is passed. His smile turned predatory. Congratulations, Queenpin Elena. You've proven you can talk your way through problems. Let's see how you handle the second trial. The second trial isn't scheduled for another week. I'm invoking the acceleration clause. If the first trial is passed decisively, the challenger can demand the second trial proceed immediately. It's in the ancient laws. The second trial will take place tomorrow at dawn. The challenge, survival. Chapter 11. Tomorrow you will be taken to the Blackwood Forest neutral territory and given a 12-hour head start, Don Matteo announced. Then my hunters will pursue you. If you survive until sundown without being caught, you pass. If we catch you, you fail. Absolutely not, Ken's eyes blazed silver. That's barbaric. Those queens had months of training. Then perhaps your Queenpin isn't ready to wear the crown. Unless you're suggesting we declare her unfit and end this farce now. The trap snapped shut. Kale, Elena thought at him through their bond, a shared, desperate connection now replacing the wolf instinct. I have to do this. They'll hunt me like prey. Then I'll be clever prey. She stepped forward before he could argue. I accept the second trial. Tomorrow at dawn, Blackwood Forest, 12 hours. Don Matteo's eyes gleamed. Excellent. I look forward to the hunt, Your Majesty. The next 18 hours were a blur of adrenaline and fear. They didn't sleep. Vera taught her evasion techniques, how to mask her scent with crushed plants and how to move silently. Sienna drilled her on defense, using leverage instead of strength and turning an attacker's momentum against them. Felix drilled her on Blackwood Forest's geography, pointing out potential hiding spots. Ilias worked with her on the bond. You're connected to every agent in our territory now. You'll be able to feel when they're close. It's not precise, but it's enough to give you a warning. As dawn approached, Ken helped her lace her boots. Come back to me, Elena. Whatever it takes, come back. I will. I'm not that invisible girl anymore. Remember, I'm a Queenpin and Queenpins don't give up. Chapter 12. The forest swallowed Elena whole. She had 6 hours before the hunt began. Her body was different now, stronger, faster, her senses overwhelming her. She ran, using every trick they'd taught her, crossing streams, doubling back and leaving false trails. At noon she felt it through the bond, Don Mateo's hunters flooding the forest, 5 of them moving fast, heading straight for her false trails. She smiled grimly. For 3 hours she watched them hunt from a high oak branch. She used her skills to evade them, letting them find her jacket near a blackberry thicket. At hour 5 she heard Don Mateo's voice. She can't have gone far, fan out, check the northern quadrant again. He was here, the boss himself had joined the hunt. Elena needed a new strategy. She reached out carefully through the bond, concentrating on Ilias and Vera, who were waiting at the forest's edge. Vera, northern quadrant, distraction. Minutes later, she felt a powerful, non-syndicate signal flare up in the northern sector. "That's not one of ours," said Bridget, Don Mateo's second. "She's using her own people as a distraction," Don Mateo growled. "Clever, after them, make sure they're not actually helping her." As the western hunters moved away, Elena ran in the opposite direction. 2 hours until sunset. That's when she heard it, a different voice closer, coming from directly ahead. 6 wolves, they brought back up. A massive grey man with scars across his face emerged, blocking her only escape route. "Name, Garrett, Western Garrett, and I'm the one who's going to catch you." The trial specified 5 hunters. "The trial specified my pack could hunt you, didn't specify how many. Loophole, clever, right?" "You're right," Elena said, stopping her retreat. "I can't beat you physically, but when you return to your boss, having caught a Queenpin who survived 5 hours against 6 agents instead of 5, how do you think that makes him look?" Western Garrett paused. "Catching me with 6 makes him look weak, desperate. You let me go. You tell your boss you searched the southern quadrant and found nothing. I survive until sunset, and when I pass there's no asterisk next to it, just a clean victory." Silence stretched between them. Slowly, Western Garrett smiled. "You've got titanium ovaries, Your Majesty, I'll give you that." He stepped aside. "Southern quadrant's clear, I found nothing, now run before I change my mind." Elena ran until the sun began its final descent. She burst out of the forest just as the sun kissed the horizon, stumbling to her knees. Behind her, Don Mateo and his 5 original hunters emerged. They stared at her in shock. "Sunset," Lydia announced, checking her watch. "The 12 hours have elapsed. Queenpin Elena has survived the hunt." Ken was instantly there, pulling her into his arms. "You did it, you magnificent, brilliant, impossible woman." 2 trials passed, Don Mateo admitted. "The 3rd trial tests heart and character. It's scheduled for the new moon 2 weeks from now." Elena sagged in Ken's arms. She survived, she won. The invisible girl had become unforgettable. Chapter 13. 2 weeks passed in focused training. Elena sat in on court meetings, learned to read the syndicate dynamics, and visited the individual operations within the Northern Territory. Everywhere she went, the capos and associates bowed, not out of obligation, but earned respect. "The 3rd trial tests heart and character," Lydia warned. "They'll present you with an impossible choice, a moral dilemma where every option has a terrible cost. They're designed to prove you'll put the family above personal desire." The night before the trial, Elena stood at the window watching the moonless sky. "I'm terrified. The other trials tested things I could prepare for. Character, how do you prepare for that?" Ken's arms wrapped around her. "You don't. You trust that the person you've always been is the person you need to be. You survived invisibility. You'll survive visibility, too. You're the bravest person I've ever met." The Western delegation arrived with representatives from all 5 major territories. The 3rd trial would be observed by the entire criminal community. Don Mateo stepped forward. "Queenpin Elena, the 3rd trial tests the quality that defines all great rulers, the strength to make impossible choices. Are you ready?" "I am." "Then hear the scenario. A loyal capo has been captured on your territory. He's killed 3 civilians in a neighboring town, violating the most sacred law of our kind. Never draw unwanted scrutiny from the law. The punishment is death. However, investigation reveals that the capo Nathaniel Stone is not acting of his own will. He's been infected with a rare, undetectable neurotoxin, a dark chemical that strips away rational thought and forces him to kill. Elena's heart sank. Nathaniel Stone was Ilias Morty's younger brother. The toxin can be neutralized, Don Matteo continued, but it requires a rare, volatile compound. Acquiring it would take months, and there's no guarantee of success. During that time, the capo must be imprisoned, where he suffers constant agony from the toxin. Or you can grant him a merciful death now, ending his pain but killing an innocent victim of biological warfare. There's a third option, Don Matteo concluded, his eyes gleaming. You can refuse to execute him and refuse to imprison him, release him to his family's custody. But if he kills again while under their watch, you and Ilias are held accountable for those deaths. Your crown, Ilias' position, and the territory's reputation, all forfeited. Impossible. Execute an innocent victim of biological warfare, imprison him in agony for months with no cure, or risk everything. Elena closed her eyes and reached deeper into the bond. She felt Ken's horror, his rage at Don Matteo for creating such a cruel scenario. She also felt Ilias' grief and desperate hope. There's no right answer, Elena realized. That's the point. Character isn't about being right. It's about being true to your values even when every choice hurts. She opened her eyes. I need more information. Can the toxin be suppressed, managed? Unknown, the toxin is rare. Little research exists. Elena turned to Ilias. If I gave you time, not months but weeks, could you find a way to suppress the toxin enough that Nathaniel isn't suffering constant agony? Ilias' eyes widened. Possibly. We have contacts, specialized labs, but Your Majesty, even suppressed, he'd still be dangerous. Then he stays imprisoned, but under humane conditions, not torture, not endless agony, imprisonment with treatment and dignity while we search for a cure. Elena turned back to Don Matteo. Here is my decision. Nathaniel Stone will be imprisoned under my personal authority. Ilias will lead a task force to research the toxin and find a cure. They have 90 days. If after 90 days we haven't found a solution, I'll revisit the question of execution. But I won't kill an innocent victim of dark chemistry without exhausting every possible alternative first. And if he escapes, if he kills again, Don Matteo pressed. Then I take full responsibility. The blood is on my hands, and I'll face whatever consequences the syndicate community demands. Elena's voice was steady. But I won't execute a 23-year-old capo for being poisoned. We find the cure, we break the curse. Silence filled the room. Then one of the visiting representatives spoke. That's the answer of a Queenpin who values life, who understands that mercy and justice aren't opposites. She's chosen the hardest path, another nodded. Taking responsibility while giving hope, that's leadership. Don Matteo stared at Elena. Then slowly he smiled. You know what the correct answer was supposed to be, whatever decision you could live with, whatever choice reflected your values regardless of outside pressure. But he turned to face the gathered witnesses. Queenpin Elena has demonstrated compassion balanced with responsibility. She is recognized by the territories as worthy. Don Matteo approached Elena, and to her shock he bowed. You've passed all 3 trials, Queenpin Elena Morty. You are recognized by the territories as a true Queenpin, intelligent, courageous, and compassionate. May your reign be long, and your decisions always this wise. One by one the other representatives bowed. Then Ken's entire court. Then, through the windows, Elena saw the hundreds of associates who'd gathered outside, all bowing to their Queenpin. Ken pulled her into his arms. You did it, your Queenpin, truly unquestionably Queenpin. Elena looked around the room, at the capos who'd trained her, at the boss who'd claimed her, at Ilias, who had tears streaming down his face because she'd given his brother hope. She thought about the invisible girl who'd once transcribed medical reports in a basement office, who'd been too plain, too forgettable, too nothing. That girl was gone. In her place stood Elena Romano, Queenpin of the Northern Syndicate, claimed to a Mafia Boss, leader of thousands. Yes, Elena said, and her voice carried across the room with the authority she'd earned through fire and fear and sheer stubborn courage. I am. You invested time, you listened to every word. The commitment of a dedicated listener is never finished. Subscribe to cement your loyalty and help my channel grow.